TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark-sided!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark-sided stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah podcast. I'm excited, delighted to be with you guys now. As always, we got an awesome show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about all things spiritual, as always, but we're also going to be talking about aliens and UFOs, which is a topic that is very much so near and dear to my heart. And we're going to have somebody who is well versed in the field of all things ufology. So if you guys have any questions or any comments during the live stream, make sure that you post those there in the chat, and I'll try to ask our guest today. And if you have any questions for myself, make sure you send those over, and we'll talk about it, man. It's all good. So I want to say a huge thank you to everybody supporting my work via Patreon. This is a listener-funded, listener-supported show. Doesn't exist without your help. So thank you for believing in my work and partnering with me. Patreon's the perfect platform to do so. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody doing that. Everybody who's been here, you know, since the beginning. Everybody who's been here since day one. You guys are awesome. But I want to welcome some of the newcomers within the last week or so. Shout out to my friend Jasmine Bellamy. Thank you, Jasmine, for coming on. Shout out to Salvador Villa and my friend Nisa. Thank you guys for coming on, believing in the work, and your support means the world. If you'd like to support, go to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to my entire discography of music, which is 200 plus songs. There's also a bunch of new music there. Now I think I got 7 or 8 songs that are new, that aren't available to the general public on the Patreon back end. You get access to our Thursday night School of the Mystics, bunch of really cool stuff. Make sure you go over there and check it out. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Also, if you have not had a chance yet to get a copy of my book, it is Spirit Realm, Angels, Demons, Spirits, and the Sovereignty of God, foreword by Jordan Maxwell. And for all of the UFO fans out there, ETs, interdimensionals, all of that kind of stuff, Chariots of Fire, I talk about my experiences and where that stems from in this book here. So I cover it all. Make sure you get it, TruthSeekah.com. Get you a copy there. We just had our first co-ed retreat, which was amazing. We had a great time. People came in from all over the country to hang out and do some breath work and guided meditations and go hiking with us in the forest down here in Alabama, and we just had a beautiful time. And so just want to say thank you to everybody who showed up, and it was great to connect in person. I love connecting with people all over the world over the internet, but something special whenever you hold a public, personal event where people get to come out and you get to hug one another and just kind of build. We had a great time. So if anybody is interested in maybe the next one, I'm looking at probably around April. So all the info will be at TruthSeekah.com. If you want to go ahead and get tickets there, they'll be up very soon. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring on today's guest. Today, my guest is my friend Philip Mantle. Philip, welcome to the TruthSeekah podcast, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon, Derek. I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Good to have you. We first met through, I think I left a comment on Calvin Parker's Facebook, trying to get in contact with him about doing an interview a couple years ago, and you responded with his contact info and how to get in touch with him, and inboxed you or whatever, and we set it up, and it was one of my first and only on location interviews that I did with Calvin Parker, and went down to pretty much where he lives. He was the one with the Pascagoula UFO abduction experience, and had a great time, meeting with him and bringing my crew in and interviewing him, and just seeing, how, he partnered with you, and you really helped to amplify his story, his message, putting together the book. And so you're his essentially publisher. And you've put a lot of work in over the years, and finding people who have amazing stories and takes on UFOs and aliens and that phenomena, and helping give them a voice with your publishing company, Flying Disc Press.
Yes, I mean, I remember the interview you did with Calvin way back when. Now it can't be 2 years, surely.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is, but I do remember it. And of course, I've just been writing about Calvin today. And when I originally contacted him, Derek, it wasn't, book-wise. What had happened was his partner on that day in October the 11th, 1973, was Charles Hickson. Charles sadly passed away in 2011, but I'd got the rights to republish a book he wrote with a chap called William Mendez in 1983. And I just thought, as an idea, maybe I could find Calvin Parker and just get an interview, put it in the back of this book. But by the time I did find him, it was too late, and I published that book. But nonetheless, I thought, an interview would be nice. So it took me about 3 months, but I tracked him down. And when I spoke to him on the phone, he was very polite, but didn't say an awful lot. Now, unbeknown to me, in the background, just a few weeks beforehand, Calvin had been at a funeral. And coming out of the church, he signed a book. I think it was a book of condolence. And he wrote his name. And those coming behind him started, winking and pointing. There's the alien guy. And it kind of upset Calvin. First of all, he thought it was disrespectful to his deceased friend whose funeral they were at. So his wife, Waynette, on the way home said, well, why don't you write, a book? Because even I don't know everything that's happened to you. You never told me everything. So he kind of said, yeah, all right, darling, I'll write a book. No intention of doing it. And then I turned up, and he just happened to mention it to me. Oh, I'm thinking about writing a book. So I said, well, maybe I can help you. So with Waynette on one side and me on the other, he did, there was no turning back then. But he was glad that he did write it. It kind of lifted a heavy burden off his shoulders, and the book went on to be very successful. We followed it up. That was called Pascagoula: The Closest Encounter. Followed up by another book called Pascagoula: The Story Continues, because Calvin had another encounter in 1993. And we found out a lot more new witnesses had come forward, and so on. And literally today, we've recently had an offer to do a graphic novel. And I was writing part of the introduction, which told how I came across Calvin in the first place, which was just by chance. Somebody said, I think this is his email, and away we go. And we've literally got other things. There's a movie being written about him. That's almost finished, is the writing. And a documentary series. The book's published in various foreign languages as well. So from that, that first initial phone call, things have changed dramatically. And like I said, I remember your interview with him way back when, 2 years ago, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about Calvin and his book, anyway, that's a large book, right? The book is really big, and I have a copy on my bookshelf, and the book is huge, and tons of research. I mean, you found all the articles and newspaper clippings, and there's a ton of publicity that went into it. Not publicity, but news coverage and newspapers. But this was way back in years ago, and that book is full of all of those pictures and articles. And one thing he told me, because I had just published a book, and he said that you guys knocked it out in like 2 months putting that book together.
It didn't take as long. I mean, when we started talking seriously about the book, one of the first things I asked Calvin was, do you have any documentation? Have you got any photographs, any letters, anything like that? And of course he didn't, because Calvin was in the thick of Hurricane Katrina, and his house is right by the river.
Yep.
And I think they were under 12, 15 feet of water. So he's no pictures of his daughter as a youngster, and no pictures of him as a young man. They all got washed away. So, whilst Calvin was writing, I'm contacting people saying, I'm working with Calvin Parker. Have you got any of this, any of that? And just about everybody that had anything, Derek, was only too happy to assist us. And the reason I put a load of newspaper cuttings in there is because it was to emphasize how big this story was when it broke in the news the day after, and it literally went around the world. So, I thought, well, I'll emphasize that. Maybe I overdid it a little bit. I don't know, but some people liked it, others didn't. But and also we put things in to show how this had been woven into popular culture, and we've continued to find out things. For example, I see you're a musician. But in 1976, I believe it was, the rock band Fleetwood Mac wrote a song called Hypnotized, and it's about Charlie and Calvin's encounter that day. We didn't know that at the time, so that kind of amazing. And it's a damn fine song, I might add, having listened to it. And then we found out, for example, again, a television station in Italy made a 2-part TV movie about the encounter. I've actually got it in black and white. Can't understand a word of it, of course, but I do have it. So all this other information came out, and then slowly but surely other witnesses stepped forward and said, well, on that night in question, I saw this as well, or I saw that. And that is continuing to happen as we speak, Derek.
Yeah. And that's just one case. That's just one scenario with Calvin Parker and his story. And you have a lot more Calvin Parkers out there, people that you work with and help tell their story, and you put in the work and you present it in a beautiful light. Where does your fascination with UFOs and aliens come from? But obviously this is something that you love to do. This is your passion. I'm looking behind you, and there's just alien memorabilia everywhere. Where does your fascination come? When did it start for you?
Yeah. I mean, as a young man, I was always interested in all things paranormal, Derek, as far back as I can remember. I've told this story before, but I'll tell you again. My mum, she came from Northern Ireland. And when she was a youngster, it was quite a rural part of the country where they lived. And for example, she had to walk 5 miles to school every day and 5 miles back. So I'll give you some idea of how, she didn't go a lot, of course. I think if I had to walk 5 miles every day, I think I'd give it a miss. But anyway, it was a kind of rural setting. And she told me about one day she met a fairy down by the river, a little female fairy, and she conversed with it. And the fairy given a little bottle to drink out of. And she told me this story many times, and I quizzed her about it down the years. And she told my children about it. So I always had that around with me. But all things paranormal fascinated me, Derek. You know, my best friend's grandmother used to live at the opposite side of the road, and I used to attend the spiritualist church with her when I was about 13 or 14. And I found it absolutely fascinating. Didn't necessarily agree or disagree with what they were saying. I found them to be honest and truthful people, and they believed in this. There was no faking going on as far as I was concerned. And then I started to read a little bit about UFOs, and that kind of got me hooked. So when I left high school in 1974, I was 16. It's only a few years later, 1978, Spielberg's blockbuster came out, Close Encounters. I'd started to read more about the subject then. And in late 1978 and into 1979, I worked in West Germany for a while. And while I couldn't speak the language, so while I was there, I asked my mother if she could send me some books to read. And she did. And this box of books arrived, and they were all about UFOs, Derek. I don't know where she got them from. So I would avidly read them on an evening. So by the time I got back from Germany, I was ready to go, you know. Just by coincidence, my aunt lived round the corner. And I live in the north of England in a county called West Yorkshire. And at that time, I lived about 5 miles from the city of Leeds. And they have an evening newspaper. My aunt brought it around, and there was a small advert for that coming Sunday, the first ever meeting of the Yorkshire UFO Society. So I didn't drive there on that Sunday. I got on the bus, went into the city of Leeds, found this meeting place. It had been organized by two brothers, Graham and Mark Birdsall, and there was about, 20, 30 people there. They put on a presentation. There was a whole table full of books, which I thought was great. And I was hooked. That was it. I was in. And there was no turning back. I just felt at home at that point, Derek. And, so that's where it all began for me.
Wow. And so have you had any other experiences or UFO sightings and encounters?
I've lost you, Derek.
Okay, I think I'm back. Have you had any UFO encounters?
Yes, things, not encounters. When I joined the Yorkshire UFO Society in the north of Yorkshire, we have what's called the Yorkshire Dales National Park, beautiful part of the world. And in and around the market town of Skipton, there's a lot of hills and dales. And there was one particular village called Carlton, only a small place, and above it was Carlton Moor. So this is covered in heather. There's very few livestock there. It's mainly used for game birds like grouse and pheasant. And for whatever reason, Derek, we used to get a lot of sightings coming from in and around these hills and moors and dales. So we used to go up there, watch and keep an eye out every now and again. So I can't remember the date, but it was in the winter of 1981. Graham Birdsall, the founder of the Yorkshire UFO Society, he telephoned me because I still wasn't driving at that point. And he said, "You fancy going up to Carlton Moor for an hour?" It was only about, just over an hour's drive from where we lived. So off we went. And we parked in a location that we knew very well. And you can see the whole of the moor in front of you. There is no buildings on it, Derek. There's nothing there. There's no lights, no illumination. And we'd been talking for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And right at the end of the moor, this little light appeared. And we knew there was nothing there. There was no buildings. There was no reason why a farmer would be out at that time and out, because this is just grouse and pheasants. This is just heather. There's no livestock there as such. So we get in the car. It's pitch black. And Graham used to drive like a maniac, Derek. He thought he was a racing car driver. So we set off across the moor. We knew the road. It's a very small road, and Graham's driving like a maniac. And I just looked out of the passenger window, and I could see down the valley. And in the valley was this, what I can only describe as like a cartwheel, Ferris wheel full of lights, all different colors, just hanging there in the sky. You know, it's a bit like if you got the London Eye and took it off its axle and stuck it in the sky. It's huge. And then it was gone. And I told Graham, we pulled the car over a bit further along. Took us a while to stop. We couldn't see it from that vantage point. Graham was as mad as hell because he hadn't seen it. So we followed the road, and that particular road takes you all the way around the moor and back to where our original position. So we drove slowly around the moor, didn't see anything else that night. You know, we stayed there for another hour, and make of it what you will. I have no idea what it was, but it was fairly similar to some of the reports that came out of this area. And I'm only sad that Graham didn't see it as well. Sadly, Graham's no longer with us, so he can't back that up. But that's what happened that night.
Wow. And that left an impression on you.
Well, it did. What it did, Derek, it convinced me, not that I needed much convincing, that investigating this phenomenon wasn't a waste of time. There was something definitely there. And, you know, so I invested as much time in it as I could, as simple as that.
And what is it of just the need to get this out? I mean, you formed a publishing company that caters to, you know, UFOs and aliens and people with what is the need to get this out to the public? Yeah,
well, you know, I just felt that there is something there that further study. You know, having witnessed it myself, and down the years I have interviewed and spoken to people from all walks of life. And so the way I look at it, Derek, is perhaps when you go back in time slightly, when people were observing strange things in the sky and didn't know what they would document it. We now call that astronomy. You know, rocks can't fall from the sky. Well, they do. You know, it's meteorites. But they didn't, at the time, they didn't know what it was. So I look upon, we're doing the same kind of thing now with UFOs. We're not entirely sure what they may or may not be. There's lots of different ideas and theories, but let's do our best to document it. And hopefully we'll find an answer that will satisfy everybody at some point. And that's why I think it's important. It's a valued area of study that's largely gone ignored by conventional scientists.
Yeah, you've heard just so many excuses or people denying it, and people who know, like people who know some things, and they're, I don't know anything. And you know, it was funny because like even Neil Tyson DeGrasse is like, yeah, he's like 0% proof. He doesn't believe in UFOs and aliens, but now he has a UFO alien show coming out about the possibility of life. And it's like, come on, give me somebody who believes or who has had experiences to kind of lead this stuff. And so, you know, you're helping people with their books. You're putting out your books. You've been writing for years, and you have a essentially a large library of work as well under your belt. But you're putting out a new one, which is called Introducing UFOs, A Young Person's Guide. What is that about? Is it trying to reach out to the next generation of seekers and people who are having these experiences and how to study?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I've discussed this with colleagues on and off for a number of years. And, you know, wherever you are in the world, if you're at high school, you are the next generation. And that's the next generation of pilots, you know, engineers, farmers, whatever. They're the next generation of everything. And in amongst them will be those that, you know, have an interest in the UFO subject. But sadly, it's not somewhere you can go and get a job, get funded and earn your way at it. So what I decided to do a few years back was try and give them the benefit of my experience, if you like. This is not to indoctrinate anyone, and give them the sort of lift up onto the first run of the ladder. Because, you know, they've got all this technology available. You punch in UFOs on Google, you'll get, you know, millions of websites. Doesn't necessarily mean that the first one at the top of the list is better than any of the others. How do you decide? It's very difficult. So I decided to write Introducing UFOs and have it illustrated by a friend of mine called Ronald Kinsella. to try and appeal to that next generation, the high school generation.
Yeah.
And let's say, I've been at it all these years, and I can give you a little lift up, or I can point the way, if you like, if it's something you want to take up. If it, you know, and it's not a waste of time. So the book goes through the cases decade by decade. We use 3 cases per decade. There's an introduction to begin with, and of course we do highlight some well-known cases like Roswell and Betty and Barney Hill, but others that perhaps are less well-known. And we have a UFO photo file right in the middle, Derek. Because I know when I was a young fella, if I got a book, I'd pick it up, look at the back cover, then I'd flick through it to see what the photographs and illustrations were like. So we've got, it's not too text dominant. It's about 150 pages, a nice selection of pictures and photographs and documents, and then wonderfully illustrated by Ronald Kinsella. So hopefully the illustration.
I'm looking at the cover. The cover looks great too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's Ronald's artwork. Hopefully we can help them along the way. Similarly, Derek, when I was started in this field, a lot of the work we used to do was in paper format. So I have all the files and things like that to fall back on. And we're looking at where we can leave these files once we're no longer involved or no longer here, in fact, so that we can preserve them for the next generation as well. I'll give you an example. There's a colleague of mine called John Hanson, former retired police detective. And John has been going around the country for years now, rescuing UFO files that were looking to be thrown away or disposed of. John has got something like 500,000 pieces of paper. So he's got a huge archive of this material, which he's making public via his own publishing venture called Haunted Skies. So look that up as well. So introducing UFOs hopefully is pointing the next generation in the right way.
Yeah, one of the big things I think with turning this on to another generation for me has just been with my music and putting these experiences and things within my music and articulating them with art, obviously. And I'm seeing just a splurge in people who come out and feel more apt to talk about their own experiences, and people who are apt to go out and actually try to have an encounter, go out and stargaze and go out and meditate under the night sky and those kind of things. So definitely with the art and music and just the way it was, you know what I'm saying, back in the day, there's always been those songs that stick with you, and like Fleetwood Mac. And then I know we had a retreat this weekend, and at the end of our retreat, we go out and stargaze and we do a meditation and things. And so we listen to, I always, as part of my ritual, I play the song by the Carpenters, Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft, I think it is. And so that's a beautiful song about going out and trying to make contact, and like it's something about the art that kind of stirs people up, whether it is a painting or a song even. There's the old Renaissance art of paintings of Jesus on the cross with these little chariots behind them with people driving these little ships in the background, and it's hidden all throughout iconography and the art, these UFOs and things. And so even seeing that from 1700s, 1600s, and even way before, when you see that stuff, it stirs you up and makes you want to look into it.
Well, yeah, art and popular culture have a big, influence on all of us, whether we recognize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Back in the 70s and 80s, there was a pop group here in the UK called Hot Chocolate. And they had a lead singer called Errol Brown, great singer, black guy, and they released a song called No Doubt About It, and it's about a flying saucer landing. It was totally different to any of their other music, Derek, but it went on to be their biggest seller. Sadly, the lead singer Errol is long gone. But I managed to track down the writer of the song. Is a chap called Steve Glenn. And I said, was it just a song, Steve? You know, because he's a songwriter. He was an artist and performer in his own right as well. And he says, no, it's actually based on a true account, Philip, but not by the band. They didn't see it. I did. Me and my writing partner. And he tells the story. They were heading to the studio one night with another band in a truck behind them when they had this sighting. He said, we went home, wrote the song in about 10 minutes. And it became Hot Chocolate's biggest seller, no doubt about it. And of course, that in turn has its own influence on popular culture. And like I said, with Calvin Parker's account, earlier this year, we were contacted by a Norwegian artist and songwriter, and she's released a 6-minute sort of techno version. It's even got Calvin narrating part of the story on it. And I can't pronounce her name. I'd love to have a go, but I think it would only be an insult if I tried it, Derek, you know. But she said, oh, just letting you know, Philip, the song's gone out to all the nightclubs in and around Scandinavia and Europe. Sadly, a lot of them are closed, of course, but with COVID. But once they open up, you'll actually hear Calvin Parker's voice booming out across the dance floor at some point. Nice. So I have made fun of him about that, I can assure you.
That's awesome.
But it just shows you, and you know, and that's once we put items in there from popular culture, just to show what has had an influence. And like with introducing UFOs, we hope that the artwork would send its own message, because they're not meant to be, you know, 100% accurate. They're interpretations. And, you know, Ronald had a free range to do the artwork. I knew Ronald beforehand anyway. And it's hoped that artwork will stimulate you and interest you and perhaps draw you in. And of course, if you read the rest of the book, then maybe you'll decide that UFOs is something that is worth pursuing. Oh, yeah.
And it's in there. And it's something about, you know, having the visual aspect too.
Playing up. Are you back?
Yeah. Sorry about that. My internet connection's just being crazy today, going in and out. But I'm gonna do an edit of this when we're done and do a nice video.
It's just the gremlins.
Yeah. Internet gremlins. But yeah, what I was want to ask you just about the UFO ships and things like that. Have you done any research or looked into the difference between like the nuts and bolts UFO craft and those type of ships versus what we would call like a chariot of fire or a plasma ship, or even some of these ships that people say are actually living entities themselves? You know, just because we see fire in the sky, it's not necessarily some type of nuts and bolts craft. That it could be some type of Merkaba or chariot of fire or something like that. Have you heard any stories or done any research on that?
Well, I mean, some years back here in the UK, there was a chap called Constable. I can't remember his first name, but he was of the opinion that UFOs were actually life forms in the upper atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And he used, at that time, infrared film. Yeah. So he put infrared film in his camera and he couldn't see anything. And he would photograph the area, and these blobs and blotches came out. So it was a topic of debate that has kind of faded away. However, if you go back as far as Kenneth Arnold even toyed with that idea that perhaps the things he saw were some kind of living creatures that we hadn't come across before. I don't know whether he pursued it any further than that, but it certainly crossed his mind. And of course, you know, the phrase now is UAPs, unidentified, you know, aerial phenomena. In introducing UFOs, it's not a case, it's more of a piece of science. It's called Project Hessdalen. And Hessdalen is a valley in central Norway. And it's surrounded by 3 mountains. And back in the early 1980s, Derek, the local inhabitants, which amounted to only a couple of hundred people, started seeing these lights down below the mountaintops and in the valley. Cutting a long story short, the UFO groups of UFO Norway and UFO Sweden set up a monitoring base in the Hessdalen Valley in the winter, very cold indeed. So they got some radar from a boat road. They got, you name, and they managed to capture the lights, on film, so you could confirm it was there, and continue to study. In the end, you'd be batches of scientists going out there. Even the late Dr. Alan Hynek went to Hessdalen, I think in 1984, and he saw the lights himself. He called it a UFO laboratory. I went out there sometime later, didn't see the lights, but I was there. So you come forward in time now. It's now run by a chap called Erling Strand, who was one of the original founders. And there is a scientific monitoring station in the area 24/7. And you can log on to Project Hessdalen's website and look at all the stuff they have. They have school parties go there. It's taught in high school. And of course, they have a webcam now, which has captured the phenomena on camera. So you can actually see it moving across the valley. In the early days, when they tried to use video cameras in the winter, they used to just freeze solid. It gets that cold. So all the early photographs were still photographs. But these are these balls of light, balls of plasma.
Yeah.
So that's another area of study that's in the book Introducing UFOs.
Yeah.
If you want to study it science-wise, there's an example of what can be done.
That's awesome. I feel like I've seen both. I've seen the cigar-shaped ships that definitely seem more nuts and bolts. But then I guess at night you see a lot of fire, just lights in the sky. It's really hard to kind of see what it looks like. And but yeah, as far as them being, for me, I tie a lot of my study and my work back into the ancient texts and things. And so for me, definitely reminds me of angelic presence, of these beautiful chariots of fire, light in the night sky coming down and doing aerial, what I'm saying, maneuvers that our aircraft can't do today. When it comes to good and bad UFOs, it's this big debate. And then obviously the work you're doing there, you're what I'm saying, being involved in this early on and hearing all of these stories. And I think a lot of the early UFO stories, 70s, 80s, 90s for sure, were a lot of terrifying stories of abductions and being taken against your will and having tests and experiments run on you. For me, like where we are now, I don't really hear those stories anymore. I really hear a lot about people calling themselves contactees and experiencers, and they're going out themselves trying to make contact with CE5 initiatives and stuff like that. Where do you think that is something that some people would say that the abduction stuff has been phased out? Like that was a true phenomena that happened, but then it was phased out through contracts with the Greys and different things like that. What's your take on that? Good in aliens versus bad aliens and them being evil and things?
I think what you'll see, Derek, if you look at the phenomena from, we'll use the benchmark of Kenneth Arnold as a start for it, just for sake of argument. The phenomena has evolved in its own right, because with Kenneth Arnold, you had the simple flying saucers, that kind of thing. In the 1950s, you had the Space Brothers, Adamski and co. and others of that nature. They've disappeared. Then in the 60s, we started with the first abductions with Betty and Barney Hill. In the 70s, you got the real high strangeness. Things just got super weird for whatever reason. Then in the 1980s, at the back, certainly the mid to back end of the 80s, we start with large amounts of flying triangles. In the 90s, the abductions really took hold with John Mark and Bud Hopkins. But they're no longer with us. So we've moved on since then. So now we have a whole mixture of things. So you could argue that it is the way we find out about the subject is through the various personalities, like John Mack, like Bud Hopkins, like before him it was Alan Hynek, and so on. If you think about that now, there isn't such a personality in the field like that. So we end up with all kinds of things. Plus, what we do have now, Derek, is the internet. and so it allows you to share all the information from around the world, you know, in the click of a finger. Whereas before we couldn't do that. You'd have to wait until the next magazine came out that someone was publishing, or the next book, before you really, or if you were fortunate like me, you correspond with individuals, you know, writing. You used to write, you know, and so things have changed most definitely. When it comes to good and bad, we can look at Calvin's experience as an example. Now, when Calvin and Charlie were fishing that night back in 1973, this thing came down behind them, this football-shaped thing with two lights on. This opening appeared, and these three creatures floated out. I mean, literally floated. They were described as humanoid, but with no neck, no eyes, no mouth. They had protrusions out of the side and one out of the front. They had mitten or claw-shaped hands. The legs were stuck together. They never moved. And they had skin that was gray, but it was like an elephant skin, all wrinkly. Now, two of these got hold of Charlie and one got hold of Calvin. Didn't hurt them. You know, didn't hurt them in any way. Took them on board this thing. Calvin said this object dropped from the ceiling about the size of a pack of cards and circled around him, but he wasn't hurt, you know. But then he says he encountered a female creature. And Calvin, both consciously and under hypnosis, he says she's evil. She's pure evil. And in his second encounter in 1993, this female being is there, as well as the other ones. He just calls them big, ugly things. And she got hold of Calvin, and he said, I was determined that I'd had enough of this. And they got into a fight, basically. Calvin was trying to kill her. And he thought she was trying to kill him. So, you know, and he's still calling her evil. He used some different expressions, let's put it that way.
Choice words.
Yeah. So, but the ugly things were just stood there and didn't do anything. So were they good, or were they just under the female's command? It's different. It's difficult to say. I mean, if we go right back to 1994, it's when I published my first book. It's called Without Consent. It's out now because I've done a revised edition. But it's all about the encounters here in the UK, nowhere else. And they don't really know. Some said it was ET, some thought it was some kind of spiritual experience, others had no. Some were frightened, others thought this is great, you know, and you know, I'm special. They've chosen me for a reason. So there's a whole mixture of things, and like we tried to emphasize in introducing UFOs, we don't hide anything there. We've got Betty and Barney Hill, we've got Travis Walton, got another case from Scotland from a place called Fife. It's a whole mixture of things, not hiding anything. So whatever, you know, where you want to study the subject, there is something for you. And similarly, when it comes to try and make any sense of the subject, there's lots of different avenues you can go down, Derek, and research that particular vein of things. It's just very difficult because there is so much information there to cherry pick and say, I'm going to investigate just that part of the subject, which some people do, of course, and to great effect. So it's very difficult for me to say. I've not cherry picked, you know, everything comes across my desk from time to time.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you're just open to it versus having an agenda, because you'll find, you know, even with that question, you'll have the ones that say they're all good, and then those will say, no, they're all bad. Be careful. They're coming to get you. And they're even demonic, even, you know, me studying this from a Christian perspective early on, I found that almost across the board, all of the Christian ufologists think that they're demonic and demons, you know, across the board. And I started studying that way until I ran across the work of a couple other people that opened me up in ufology to look at people outside of clergy kind of thing. And one of them was Patrick Cook. Are you familiar with his work and BibleUFO.com that was out several years ago?
No, I've heard the name, but that's about all I can say.
Okay. Yeah, he had an amazing website that once he passed, his wife let it lapse, and I've been trying to rebuild it with BibleUFO.net, trying to get a lot of he had hundreds of thousands of pages of research, and most of it was like a lot of Bible references to what could be UFOs in the Bible and aliens in the Bible and these clouds by day and fire by night and God speaking from a cloud and coming out of a cloud and going back in. He had just tons and tons and tons of just research on these biblical anomalies when it comes to ET contact and the paranormal as well. So his work really opened me up to start venturing out more from more of a biblical perspective, but saying that, hey, these things might not be demons that are come here to abduct and kidnap people kind of thing. And so from my research, just like you said, there's a mixture of the spiritual aspect of people who are having, we'll call it demonic encounters or ghost encounters or whatever they are, and they're calling it aliens. They woke up and there were beings in their room. Automatically it's aliens, you know, that kind of thing.
There was a time when Calvin thought that they must be the devil's work, you know, scared the Jesus out of him, you know, and to him. So it was just something that passed. He believes in God, you know, and without offending people's beliefs, I've often said, you know, the Bible is probably the most paranormal book that you could buy. It's got everything in it. And of course, there is the ancient astronaut theories that goes back. I remember reading Eric von Daniken's book, his first book, Chariots of the Gods, with the subtitle, you know, is God an astronaut? Found it fascinating. I'm not saying I agree entirely with it, but I found it nonetheless fascinating, and was fortunate enough to meet Eric some years later in Vienna, and but nonetheless fascinating. So, but like I said, I remember one lady here in the UK, she had what we call a close encounter, and she totally believed this was of a spiritual nature. And afterwards, she said she became a spiritual healer. Yeah. She said, I did not have this, I'll call it a power, but I did not have this ability prior to this encounter. It all started that day. And she was grateful for it. She found it amazing. But like I said, you know, there's a bit of everything, whichever way you want to study it. And it's there for you.
Yeah, that's what I figured, you know, and so I guess leading to my next question, what do you think about the CE5 initiative and people going out trying to make contact, whether it's through meditation and asking for sightings and asking for these ships to show up? It seems like you're just championing, you know, any type of research and any type of furtherance in the field.
What I've done via Flying the Express, I mean, I started it in 2015. The idea behind it was to publish as much material as I could that you perhaps wouldn't find, you know. So the first book, for example, was UFOs over Poland by a colleague of mine in Poland. And some very strange cases in there, Derek, that you will never have read. Then I followed it up with UFOs over Romania by Dr. Dan Farkas. Again, the same type of thing. But, you know, we have a book by Nancy Tremaine. You know, Nancy's interacted with all kinds of creatures and of a spiritual nature, a dimensional nature. Her book is actually called Preordained. That's the name of her book. And it's a fascinating read. I'm not saying you have to agree or disagree with it, but nonetheless, you can still find it fascinating. And so that's the idea behind the book. And like I said, things are evolving within the UFO subject. Yeah. We keep hearing the word disclosure again. I kind of sigh when I hear that, because it's the kind of thing that goes round in circles. It resurrects itself every 5 or 10 years, Derek. It used to be, the last time its incarnation was Operation Right to Know. And they were adamant that the government, whoever that is, were going to release the information. And now we have disclosure, and the government's going to release the information. But I just say, don't hold your breath as far as that's concerned. For example, Derek, let's assume we have information that aliens are real and we're being visited, who would you trust to deliver that news to the world? Would you trust?
I think it was one of the things where the closure's coming from the skies, and if Donald Trump came out and told us about UFOs, I'm not going to believe him.
Exactly. So even if you were a Trump supporter, he's only one man. If it was the United Nations, if it was the Pope, there'd always be people who didn't believe it for whatever reason. And of course, we talk about the Western world. There's parts of the world that don't have access to Western technology and television and internet, so they wouldn't know about it in the first instance. So if you're waiting for disclosure, then don't hold your breath. What I would say is, and again, this is sort of highlighted in introducing UFOs, is to go make up your own mind. Don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
The information is there. You can study it at your leisure. You can find out more information and become as involved or not, but you can still study it and draw your own conclusions when you're ready.
Yeah.
And like I say, keep the mind open. Don't pick any one particular theory, because what tends to happen, Derek, is if you pick a theory, you will only cherry pick the evidence to support your theory and ignore everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like eating the potatoes on your dinner and leaving the meat and vegetables.
Yeah. I do think that the spiritual aspect of it is really interesting, and that's probably the part that appeals to me the most. It all appeals to me, whether even if it's government reverse technology, and there's some of us up there, and many people believe that with the flat earth theories, and those people, they take another approach to UFOs, that there is no outer space, and these are interdimensional ships that we're seeing that are in another dimension in our atmosphere. You have all of these different theories, but then, like you said, you cherry pick, because let's just take the flat earthers, for example. They will dismiss anything that has to do with outer space, where we talk about stars and ships coming out of what looks like stars and all of these kind of things. And so you cherry pick. But for me, I like the spiritual side, because I feel like it has repeatability for me. Like, to go out to stargaze and to try to make a spiritual connection and get ships to appear. Like, I've done it. Like, I've spent, a lot of hours under the night sky, the morning sky, the day sky, and I've seen these ships come out of nowhere and almost come even just to say hello. Wait till I acknowledge them. Like, I see them. Okay, there it is. Boom, it's gone. It stays there until I see it. Once I see it, then it disappears. I've seen hundreds. I've seen fleets of UFOs in the daytime. I was looking for it, though. I was doing the research. I'm listening to the interviews. I'm trying to consciously, send those thoughts and prayers, and asking the Creator that if it's something beautiful to let me see. And like, in this period of a good probably 4 years, I was seeing so much stuff.
From your point of view, Derek, if you believe in the Creator, then whatever UFOs are, and then he created them,
even if they are evil.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
But I mentioned a colleague there called Dr. Dan Farkas from Romania. Dan has a theory that yes, we are being visited, but the beings that are coming here are not a couple of thousand years in advance of us. Not tens of thousands, not even hundreds, but possibly millions of years in advance. And that's why we can't make any sense of it. We're not high enough on the evolutionary scale.
Yeah.
And it gives an example there. Like I said, if you've got a TV set and put it in an ant's nest, the ants would know it's there. They would run all over it and be able to feel it and see it and touch it. The soldier ants might even attack it, but never in a zillion years will be able to figure out what it is and where it comes from and how it works.
Yeah.
So, if you put humans on a similar scale, we perhaps We are the ants of the universe, and the things we see are so advanced we just can't make any sense of it.
Yeah.
And that was just an idea, and I found it kind of interesting. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just found it a different way of looking at it. And also when you talk about the good and evil, here on this planet, we test all kind of things on animals.
Yeah.
On dogs, on rabbits, on chimps. We'll test out, medication and all kinds of stuff. Vaccines. So are we evil?
I know. Yeah. It's subjective, right?
Yeah. You go and ask the monkey.
Yeah.
And if he could speak, he'd probably say, yeah, what you're doing to me, you're evil.
You won't let me out this cage. I mean,
But
it's the same thing that we would do if we had, if we, and we most likely have, found down ships. We're running experiments on these and locking them up, on these ETs and things.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, when you're talking about the ETs doing things to us,
yeah, are
they evil? Or is it just that we're the lab rats, and whatever they come from, whatever culture they have, whatever laws they have, that it's justified in doing those kind of things because we do it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And so just because something's uncomfortable, we like to think that it's evil or bad. You had to go through this uncomfortable situation. Same with that, right?
It's like when we go around the world, things are different from country to country. Yeah. They're not necessarily good or bad. They are just different.
Yeah.
And sometimes ignorance leads us to think that, no, what they're doing is wrong. Well, it's not wrong. It's just different. And it's as simple as that. So when it comes to good and evil aliens, I don't know. I'm not sure. But it's an area that's worthy of further study, is it not?
Yeah. And we got a bunch of questions here in the chat, and I'll try to translate some of them to you. My friend Jaguar here, he's bringing up something that we experienced together back when we were going out all the time. It was his first time, and I was trying to tell him about my experiences and going out and seeing UFOs, and if you believe it, when we'll go out, then you'll have a sighting and all of that. So we ended up going camping down here in Atmore, Alabama, and the goal was to go make contact. The goal was to go out, meditate, play some music under the stars and that kind of thing, and really see if we can see something. And we were in the country, and so there's a level of expectation that we built up for him to come out with us and do it. And so we went out, and literally within an hour, I think it was 12 ships that we counted, these 12 just lights in the sky that were traveling and doing strange aerial maneuvers. And within an hour window, we counted 12, and then no more, and no later from like 10 to 11. And that was it for the rest of the night. We were playing music, and it was just a beautiful experience for us. We wake up the next morning because we're camping out. We wake up to a helicopter hovering above the tree line right where we were sleeping in our tents. And they had a bar going across the bottom of the helicopter, and he was spraying us with chemicals. And his door was open on the helicopter, and he's looking at us laughing. We wake up with this really strong stench, like, what is this? And we look up, and the guy is spraying us with chemicals in this helicopter. And it was just, we were trying to put two and two together. We got up and tried to wrap everything up and jumped in our car and took off as quick as we could, about 6 a.m. And so that was an experience that we had, and he's bringing up here in the chat. Have you heard anything like?
Well, the only reference, of course, would be the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when they're trying to clear everyone out of from Devil's Tower. They spray something that puts people to sleep. That's the only thing I can think of. But that is bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have terrified the living daylights out
of me. No, it did. I don't know if they were connected, I mean, in my mind they were, because, like, just my research, it's almost like you open a portal to be able to see that stuff, and I don't know if they can tell or what. You're just trying to do your research and how to figure it out, but very bizarre, nonetheless, to have both of those experiences. Another question here from another friend who we've been talking about. We've been talking about these little blue orbs that we've seen. I had an experience that I wrote about in my book, and I just said it. I call it fairies because me and my daughter went out and built a little fairy house in the ground and just made this little home and welcomed the fairies to come. And then maybe a week later, we go outside in our backyard stargazing, just me and her. And I would tell her we're looking for angels, is what I would tell her when she was little. And we'd stargaze and try to see if we could see something moving and that kind of thing. And when we're doing this, all of a sudden, out of the top of the tree line, these little, about 4-inch long, little blue fluorescent orbs come out. They all come out of the top of the trees. It was a handful of them. And they come down, and they're flying through the trees, and they come down right above us. And I jokingly told my daughter, "Hey, it's the fairies. Let's ask them if they'll come down," playfully. And literally, like a movie, they came down and started circling around me and my daughter, like the movie Avatar or something. Fluorescent, about 3 to 4 inches long, little ovals. They go around us, and then they go back up into the trees exactly like they came and disappear. I run inside, get on the internet. Blue orbs, blue fairies, blue UFOs, blue lightning bugs. We have lightning bugs down here, but they're yellow and a lot smaller. And I couldn't find anything. One of my friends here in chat, Dave, we talked about it. He has had some type of blue entities, kind of orbs appear in his room. He talks about. Have you heard anything about?
Yeah. Well, if you go back to not just orbs, but the creatures. If you go back to Whitley Strieber and his first book, Communion, some of the creatures he saw there were blue.
Yeah,
little blue guys. Even the Beatles sang a song about the little blue meanies. the blue. But yes, what tends to happen, Derek? It's some of them are blue, but there's other colors as well. People will see these, we'll call them orbs or small lights. Some, like yourself, will just describe them as lights or orbs. But others will say it's a spirit, or it's a ghost, or it's an alien. But the stimulus was these blue lights, And again, just by pure coincidence, if we go back to Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson, when they were driving up to their fishing spot that night, Calvin had never been there before. They passed a no entry sign, and Charlie said, "It'd be all right, don't worry about it." So they stood on an abandoned pier from an old shipyard with cast their rods out into the water, and it was a blue light from behind them. Calvin thought, "It's the police. We shouldn't have ignored the no entrance sign." And he wishes to this very day that it had been the police. But of course it wasn't. And it was this, when he turned around, he says, this intense, dazzling blue light. And he says it was the type of light, it took you a while for your eyes to adjust before you could see what was behind it. So blue lights are, and I think it was Kevin Randall who did a study about official space recovery operations by the U.S. Air Force, and it seemed what the word blue was often used, like Project Blue Book,
Blue Avians. That's another word popping up.
Yeah. So the even in what we call military terms for retrievals of these things, or space debris, or whatever, that the word blue, maybe just a coincidence, crops up every now and again. But certainly, I know Strieber saw these little blue creatures. Yes, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah, it's interesting. Keep going back to Calvin. I know you probably heard me talk about it in the interview, but I went out to Pascagoula, very close, and this is before I knew exactly where it was. I remember hearing about the story, but it had been some years removed for me, and going out to the Welcome Center and right there across the bridge in Pascagoula, there's one there, and I would go out there and try to make contact, and it was so cool to talk to Calvin after having my own experiences out there, and I was like, I need to get up with him. I would love to see if he would like to kind of go back out and make contact. And I brought it up to him, you know, in our interview. He's still a little skittish, but he seems open to it, you know, at this part of his life. And so, yeah, I've had those encounters in Pascagoula as well. I just love it. For me, everything's been beautiful. You know, all my interpretations, all of my sightings, and what it does to, you know, for your spirit, for creativity. Again, it's coming out in the art, it's coming out in paintings and videos.
It's strange. It's funny you should mention that, because, like I said, when I wrote Without Consent, and I spoke to a number of the people then, and it was surprising how many of them said that they'd had this, I call it side effect. And it was of an artistic nature. Yeah. Like you said, creativity. Yeah. And there was one young man down in Wales called David. And David was pretty much like me when I was at his age, you know, denim jacket, long hair, rock music. But after his encounter, and he swore me to secrecy, he didn't want his friends finding out, he began to write poetry. But it was spontaneous. He wouldn't sit down and think about it. He got a job in a local hotel, and he said, Philip, you know, it'll come to me and I have to write it on the napkin or whatever. And it all was a result of his encounter. So there's this side effect, for want of a better word, which is of an artistic, or like you said, a creative. And I'd love to have studied that further. So it's a question to be asked, I would think, if someone's had such experiences. Did you have any side effects? Did anything happen to you, good or bad, as a result of this? And one of them is that creative spark. Interesting, is it not?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just the awe and wonder, and, you know, it's just like a natural phenomenon, I think, for me. Well, I wouldn't say it was supernatural, but it was like, it brings this part of you out that maybe you didn't know existed, or it opens up so much more. At least for me, it did. What about, so we're talking about the government, we're talking about disclosure. What's your take on the government finally coming out with this branch of the military called Space Force, where they're going to try to police outer space and protect the Earth, or whatever they plan on doing? When they came out and they were vocal that's a branch of the military now, Space Force.
No, I just think it's hilarious, to be honest. How can you police space? I mean, it's just not practical. It's a bit like you go back to Ronald Reagan and his Star Wars initiative. That was kind of patrolling the skies without people, but building an anti-missile network that would shoot down any Russian, missiles coming your way. But it never got anywhere. It never got off the ground, and there was a big hoo-ha about that. But I'm no disrespect to the American president, but it just seems like a crazy idea. How the cost of getting into space, the difficulty of living there, hasn't gone away, and how you would patrol it. Who owns space? America doesn't own it.
We UK get up there first. We do.
Yeah, we don't. You planted flags on the moon, but it doesn't mean you own it. Surely, space belongs to no one or everyone. So how we would police it? I just think it's crazy. I don't give it much thought at all, to be honest, Derek.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. And I think, for me, it goes back to, them being so far advanced of whatever is traveling here from outer space that we don't want a war with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think in an instant they could, if they wanted to, they could wipe every living creature off the face of the earth.
About the SETI program, wasn't it? That we shouldn't be sending messages out into space because, what if somebody hears it and then when they get here, they don't like us very much, Yeah. So, but no, Space Force, it sounds like a television program, doesn't it?
Well, they just made one, and that's what they always do, right? They just try to, and it's some weird comedy. They just trying to get, it almost seems like celebrities to kind of like make it seem fun or something, laughing or like a joking matter, because they literally came out with the show Space Force right after, probably a year after they announced Space Force.
Yeah, maybe we should send a few celebrities into space. That'll be good for a laugh. I could put a few on the list, or a few politicians.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this other experience that I've had, and I've seen this twice. Once when I was a teenager, and then several years after. And this could be something natural, I don't know, but I've seen it twice. A green blinking light that falls falls straight down. It doesn't shoot like a shooting star, but it's a flickering green light that flashes from the sky, from the heavens, and then goes out. Have you heard anything about that? I've seen it twice.
I think what do they call them? Is it sprite? Is it a sprite? There is, a number of things what we would call related to lightning, but it's not the conventional lightning that we would know. But whether it be, sheet lightning or fork lightning, there are offshoots of it. And some of it is quite weird. There's lightning that also goes up, not just that comes down.
Yeah.
So I think it might be an offshoot of something like that. Again, going back to my mum, and I couldn't understand it when I was a kid. But if we ever had a thunderstorm, she would always open the front door. She would leave the front door open because we used to have a coal fire in those days. So we had a chimney, and there was ball lightning, and the tradition was if ball lightning came, into your house, it had to have an exit, which was out the front door, of course.
Yeah.
So, but there are other, we'll call it light phenomena that is linked to electricity. It's kind of like a second cousin, and it may be something like that.
Yeah.
'Cause we have earthquake lights as well, of course, small and large. So I don't know, but that's what springs to mind, Derek, if I'm honest.
Yeah. This was like somebody dropped something though, just a single blinking light. Yeah. Huh. Strange. Yeah, I mean, you want to get to the bottom of it, and figure out, and you have these experiences and people chase them. I've been chasing a lot of them, and I've come to the point where I think in that I've opened myself up for more experiences, and just when you go out looking for this stuff, you find it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that night we hit the jackpot on the moors back in 1981. Sadly, Graham wasn't looking in the right direction. He was too busy being a racing driver, But we tried on many occasions to see something up there, but finally did. And it convinced us we were on the right track. We tried to get up close and personal, but never managed that. But it didn't stop us trying, Derek. And I don't know the neck of the woods where you live, but up on the moors there in January it's pretty cold, So we didn't go too often. It was too cold.
What about disinfo? Do you intuitively hear somebody's story and just think, nah, they're making it up, or do you give everybody across the board the benefit of the doubt?
Well, again, keep an open mind, but we know not just in this subject, Derek, but pretty much any. There will be people who embellish things, for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter, if you were in a club that collected stamps, you'd speak to someone, and of course he'd have a better stamp collection than you. He'd never show you it, of course, but I've got it, or I've got the world's rarest stamp, or if you were a steam train enthusiast, I've seen them all. I've seen the Flying Scotsman do 500 mile an hour, and no, you haven't. It can't go that fast, but you just got to play along with these people. I don't think they mean much harm. And that's just a fact of life, Derek.
Well, what about the ones who are, getting paid behind it? Like, I just throw a name out there that a lot of people question, Corey Good. There's comic books, and then there's all of these far out stories, and that kind of stuff with like Corey Goods and stuff that have a whole productions behind what a lot of people believe to be made up stories.
Yeah, well, that's it. There is that desire to believe. And there'll always be an outlet for that. And you can call it disinformation. You can call it, a hoax. You can give it whatever label you want, but there are always people that want to believe this or any such thing. That the world is full of them.
Yeah.
And the way to deal with that is not to believe it and just ignore it, and it will go away. It is as simple as that. But they are there, yes, and you should give them short shift, in my opinion. But again, who am I? You know, I'm like I said earlier, make up your own mind.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to listen to me. Come to your own conclusion. And when I've interviewed people down the years, Derek, I've never said to them, "Well, this is what's happened to you." Mm-hmm. I've always let them come to their own conclusion, because who am I to tell anyone?
Yeah.
And if they believe that these are fairies at the bottom of the garden and they're happy with that. I mentioned that young man, for example, in Wales called David. David had a close encounter. He was abducted. It was very frightening to him. He was only a young man at the time. He had to have hypnotherapy because he had nightmares. He couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
And I asked David, sometime afterwards, what was this thing? What's the nature and origin of it? He said, Philip, it must have been the Russians. Now, he doesn't think for a minute that it was the Russians, but something bad happened to him that night. And the only bad guys around at that time were the Russians, i.e., therefore it must be the Russians. Yeah. So who am I to argue? Let him believe that. If it's his way of dealing with it, then that's fine. That's fine by me.
Yeah. Another question here from Jaguar says, can you ask Phil if he has ever seen them fight, either seen or the wars, the UFO wars, like them fighting each other? Have you ever seen them, or have you ever interviewed anybody who's pretty convincing? I remember somebody that I interviewed before he passed away was Ed Grimsley, who claimed that you can go out with night vision goggles, and he claimed that he would see them have fights and shootouts in space, like Star Wars even. And that even for me lends to, there was something that Edgar Casey said, that the Battle of Armageddon would be fought in outer space. But have you read anything? Have you heard any eyewitnesses?
Well, there's only two things. There's I think it goes back to the 1990s when there was one of the shuttle cameras, and you saw this thing. You could see this dark sky. And there's this thing moving, and then all of a sudden there's this huge streak of light is fired towards it, and off it goes. It made the news at the time. It was sensational, and they were thinking that's us firing at it, and it got out of the way in time. When it comes to one-on-one, the only one I know of going, I keep referring back to him, is Calvin. In 1993, Calvin went out on the fishing boat on his own. He'd only planned to go for a couple of hours. So he got a drink of water and something to eat. And he said he was laying there looking up, and you could see this cloud, and this cloud opened. There was an opening underneath it, and in he went. Cutting a long story short, this female alien was there again, and she'd hurt Calvin. And he said, I've had enough. And he was paralyzed to begin with. And he said, I'm waiting for an opportunity. And he managed to get hold of her and bang her head against the wall. And Calvin was actually looking for an opening, a doorway. And he said, even if we'd be suspended in the sky, I was going to get hold of this female creature, and we're both going out the door one way or another. And it meant if it means I die, but she's going to die with me. But then, the big ugly thing interceded, and that was the end of it. So those are the only two things that spring to mind, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories about it, and this war, this battle that's being fought in the heavens and stuff, and it's very interesting. So I wanted to ask that question.
Well, it's nothing new, is it? You're a Christian man. There's the war in heaven in the Bible.
Yeah.
And the devil's cast out. He ends up on the losing side. So wars in heaven are nothing new. Like you said, some of the ancient texts in other languages and cultures, they talk about battles in heaven and
flying machines.
So it's nothing new in that respect.
Yep, 100%. Your take on Billy Meyer and his story?
I think we can end it there. Billy Meyer is a liar, and all his photographs are a fake. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I'm with you. I
Yeah.
think so too. Yeah. I had one of his people come on a couple years ago, and they just tried to take up for it. But yeah, you can. They're his. Yeah, and they were trying to keep going with it. But I mean, for some people, Billy Meyer's their way in. Some people like Corey Good or whatever. They hear their story, and it opens them to the world of ufology.
Yeah, like we said before, people want to believe,
Yeah.
and it's almost like a cult.
Yeah. I wanted to believe it, but when I looked at the evidence, there's no way I could,
Well, that's it. If you keep a rational head on and look at the evidence, then you'll come to the same conclusion. It's a fake.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Did you ever see any other videos or look at the guy? He's passed as well, but Prophet Yahweh had a viral video of him going out and trying to do it was one of the first UFO summonings on camera, but he had the news crew that came out with him, and he said he learned how to summon UFOs by using the Hebrew version of the Bible, and they go out in Los Angeles and he prays and puts his hands up and there's this orb that appears. Did you ever see those videos?
I did see it, yeah, but it was a 5-minute wonder, wasn't it, Derek? And it was here and today and gone tomorrow. And I'm pretty sure it reminded me of like a modern day magician, that they can do all kinds of things, and they have a TV crew. I've seen Uri Geller bend the spoons in his own home. And I'm not saying he's a faker or anything like that, but if he is, I couldn't see how he did it, So, but again, it's another story that's been and gone. So I don't put any substance on it at all. Sorry.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like if you want to believe, I mean, you find it. And I found out, early on, again, I want to make sure that's what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to just see a light. I'm like, oh, I seen a UFO just because I seen a light in the sky. You want more proof. Like, I want to see something that, something that's that we don't have to kind of pretend or stretch that this is what it was. I think that the proof is out there and the truth is out there. So I would see lights and I would get excited, but then it would be a plane, or it would be a satellite or something.
When we look at cases like Calvin's or Travis Walton's, there's other independent witnesses. So you're not just dealing with lights in the sky. It's things, so many people have come forward now that we're confident if we took Calvin's case to court, we could prove something happened to him that night. Because people from all around the area all saw these blue lights, over that patch of the river. And like with Travis, he was 5 or 6 of his work colleagues in the truck, just 100 yards from him, if that. So they're not going to mistake it for a light in the sky or anything other. And there's lots of other stories just similar to that don't hit the headlines, of course. So the evidence is there. You've only just got to look for it.
One more question before we go here. What do you think about what people would call chemtrails, or the government spraying clouds in the sky, artificial clouds? Essentially, they turn into clouds to block UFOs traveling so that we can't see a lot of the UFO activity in the sky. Have you heard anybody talk about any of that?
Well, I've seen it on the internet, but I haven't taken a lot of notice, to be perfectly honest. Because a lot of the so-called evidence just looks like airplanes to me. I don't see any logic behind it whatsoever. I could, rather than UFOs be involved, I could be interested if they were trying to alter the weather, because it's the one thing on Earth that we can't control no matter what we try and do. So I could buy it if these were some kind of experiments to try and control the weather in some respects. But how could you hide a UFO with a vapor trail?
Well, what about the cloud seeding stuff? I thought that was like
that work. I think that works on like a small scale, but on large scale. Well, if you could do it instantly, then you wouldn't have had the forest fires and what have you in California. You could have just made it rain and saved all that devastation and people's lives and so on. But by the fact that it hasn't happened, probably it tends to say that we haven't found a way of doing it yet.
Your new book is Introducing UFOs, a young person's guide. It's usually everywhere books are sold. I know it's usually on Amazon, but all of your stuff's on the website. If you want to go ahead and let everybody know where they can go to check out all of your work, because you have a lot that you have done and that you bring to the table. So where people can go to check out your work, Philip.
Yeah, just tab in flyingdiscpress.com. That's disc with a K, and you'll find the website there with all the books on. And as you said, Derek, they're all on Amazon. Easy.
Good stuff, Philip. Thank you for everything that you're doing, all the work that you're doing to further this field and to encourage people to step into it, ask the bigger questions, which means the world. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and I really enjoyed our talk. Let me know. I guess at the same time, a huge thank you for sending me guests too. You send me a lot of the guests and people that you work with and stuff. So thanks for everything, brother. And I'd love to have you back on. Let me know when you want to come back on. We'll do it again.
Well, you take care, Derek, and my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, brother. Many blessings.
Bye-bye now.
All right, bye-bye. Philip Mantle, ladies and gentlemen, doing a lot for ufology and helping get a lot of people's voices out there who have had experiences. Definitely check out this brother's body of work. When you have a body of work, and he's been doing it for a long time and doing it really well and consistently, and especially his book with Calvin Parker. I have it in the living room, and it's full of research, full of articles, full of newspaper clippings and all of those things, which I think is really cool. So make sure y'all check out his work, support people who are out there on the front lines doing the good work, man. So Jaguar says, one of my faves on your podcast. Have a blessed day. Thank you, man. Yeah, good stuff. Again, just approaching it from a non-biased perspective is huge. Just looking at the evidence, and then obviously, make your conclusion. Draw your own conclusion after you look at all the evidence. And the interesting thing, which I believe, and I think Philip as well, that most of these experiences or scenarios are true. Like the universe is so vast and large that two people's story can contradict one another and still be true, which is the interesting thing. My fascination and experiences with ufology has changed and has grown over the years, and has come through art, movies, art and movies and fiction, and even, sharing this stuff, almost science fiction, even, Star Wars and all of that stuff. But I think a lot of that stuff, they hide really deep truths in these movies, and a lot of people are into Star Trek and things like that, and can go back and talk to you about these different races and of aliens or beings, and the abilities and telekinesis and telepathy and all of the stuff that comes with ufology and seeing UFOs or summoning UFOs even. So something really, near and dear to my heart, and it goes back to the scriptures. For me, it's the angelic. It is the study of the angelic, even if it is that people want to know, do you think that it is physical beings that live on another planet? Like, do they go and live? Do they have families and all of this kind of stuff, right? Listen, we don't know. But even if they do have another planet and they travel here, just like the cargo cult theories, that we would call them angels, we would call them gods even. If we go back to the Anunnaki, we go back to the Elohim. These are our gods. They created us. They've been watching over us when we were yet primitive. They've had this technology. They've been here since the beginning. So with that being said, man, do your own research. Go out, make connection under the sky. You can do it. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. We got a lot more coming to you guys. I'm excited about what's ahead. If you've not yet supported, go to patreon.com. Look at all the tiers. You get access to a bunch of really cool stuff. With that, I'm going to say peace. Shalom, shalom. We'll do it again. There's the outro right there. Boom.
Your way so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.